And I hope to have all kinds of visitors from all over the world again. Sorry about the glare on my glasses. So yeah, last night was one of those nights. Hmm. As any of you know, especially Gen X baby boomers, um, as life gets more complicated, you sleep terrible some nights. So I think I got about 4.5 hours sleep. And what I did is I laid there in bed for well over an hour. And finally, I just decided to get up and have my coffee and get the day started. I'll catch a nap later. Um, I know some people that have to get 8 hours, 9 hours a night, and that's just not been my reality. Um, Typically 7 hours, 8 hours is fine. 8 hours is great, actually, but it's rare for me. So, a few things going on this week. Um, One of which that I put these things in the title of this live cast. Um, the first one is joint replacement. So yeah, I hope she didn't get too aggravated for me saying so, but my girlfriend had a total knee replacement this week, and that's a lot. She's had knee problems for decades, and it's when people get knee replacement, typically it's when the cartilage is broken down, and so once the cartilage in the joints break down, you get bones rubbing on bones, and that can be really excruciating. So anyway, she got a total knee replacement, and of course, being a nurse, I've seen joint replacements for years, but actually living with someone who has a joint replacement, it just strikes me the absolute sheer amount of time it takes to recover from a joint replacement. Why is this pertinent and important for my YouTube channel? Well, this YouTube channel is specifically geared toward men in their late 40s, 50s, and 60s. And of course, if you're in that age group, lots of times, if you worked hard on your legs, were on your feet for years and decades, your joints go to hell. And so, especially runners can really be brutal on their joints, on their knees, ankles, hips. So, hey, Elijah, thanks for joining. Good morning. Um, and if you pop in and give a comment, I'd love to know where you're commenting from, where you're at. So, anyways, she had a total knee replacement. Why is that pertinent? Well, especially with lots of men that I work with that are single, it's interesting that a lot of people choose to stay single in their, after going through a marriage or two marriages. And I got to tell you, I don't know, it seems darn well near impossible. I know people do it, but it seems near impossible to go through a joint replacement and really do it safely as a single person. I know people are tenacious and they can get things like that done, but it's really amazing how people like caregivers. All of a sudden, you become a caregiver for someone, and you start giving care to, like, some of us have parents with memory issues, cognitive issues. Some of us have family members with chronic health conditions. But all of a sudden, when you're thrust into the role of being a caregiver, it changes the calculus on a lot of things. So many things. Finances are impacted, your freedom is impacted. And what I'm finding is just the sheer amount of what the work that was split by both of us in the household, the sheer amount of change as far as I'm having to do almost everything in the house. Certainly not complaining. It's my pleasure. But I don't know how people pull this off as far as major medical health concerns when they're single. Now, is that going to be the only reason why someone's going to choose to go ahead and be with a partner, or choose to um, get together with someone in a long term relationship? No. But I think it should be a consideration, because I have talked to several people that they're more than happy to be single for the rest of their days. So, what happens when the health conditions come in? It's really difficult to manage by yourself, manage your health, keep up with your health, and do that by yourself. I did work with a coworker whose ex-husband, they had been ex-husband and wife for years, like 7 years, and he wasn't taking care of his health. And she, out of the goodness of her heart, would go over there every once in a while to check on him, sort out his medications, and also to clean his place. Well, part of it was, oh, thanks, Elijah, for popping in West Palm Beach, another person from Florida. I'm in Sarasota. Um, so she would go over and clean his place. And really, of course, he was in a state of depression, so he wasn't cleaning his place, and it was just really getting worse and worse. But the point is, yeah, I mean, I think the guy was difficult to get along with because he was a veteran and he had a lot of issues and struggled with addictions. But even these things aside, even if things are on a normal state, when you have health issues, when you have health challenges going into your 50s and 60s, doing these things single is a big factor. It's a challenge, and it's really scary to be, you know, to see this in person. Um, I decided after my divorce that I didn't want to be single into my senior years. I didn't want to go into my senior years by myself, and my partner did as well. And we decided that individually, we decided that, hey, life is too rich to be experienced by yourself, but also the health issues, specifically her knee replacement, has definitely pointed out to me that it's challenging enough to do life by yourself under good circumstances, but when you have health concerns come up, then things really get real. And especially as challenged post divorce, because the social life is really kind of beat up, and social connections aren't necessarily as strong. So people on the outside that can come and help. And I will give a caveat. That's why a lot of people join churches where they have support. I've seen some churches do amazingly well with supporting their other believers and people in the church as far as bringing meals and bringing support. Um, so yeah, that's all I got to say about the joint replacement thing. But if those of you, send your prayers up for my girlfriend, because she's in a lot of pain. She's going through physical therapy, which is excruciating, and antibiotics, all the things that go along with surgery. So this is an interesting time to be experiencing this, and we have big hopes on living a very adventurous life and doing some, cool hikes and travel and stuff like that. But you got to have good knees, good ankles, good hips for this, and you got to be in shape. The other thing that I was gonna comment on this morning is gray divorce. Now, gray divorce, I'm gonna look up the actual definition of gray divorce. I think it's divorce after 45 years old, but let's check on that. Let's see. What exactly is the definition of gray divorce? All right, I said the great divorce. That's not what we're asking. What is the definition of gray divorce? Okay. So gray divorce is when people over 50 years old end up ending their marriage. So some of the statistics I had looked up, um, this is something I'm going to work on content more about is gray divorce. So the the rates of gray divorce in the U.S. has skyrocketed. Okay, um, and so this says between 1990 and 2008, the rate tripled for gray divorce. That's substantial. These are people over 50 years old that divorced. Now, I tell you, as a caveat, I had a guy in my divorce care group at the church I was going to right after my separation. And he was 72 years old when his wife left him. That was just, life changing. 72 years old when his wife left him. Now, the guy seemed pretty dogmatic and pigheaded and really set in his ways. And I got to tell you, a lot of people in their 70s are set in their ways. He was a little extra, so it was he was Italian and really had his mind set in certain ways. So I felt like he was going to have a challenge ever finding someone to settle down with or love him because he was a bitter, bitter man because she had left. I don't know the the ins and outs of why she left him, but that's pretty much devastating to have your spouse leave you in your 70s. I also had a coworker whose mother was with someone and they were in their 80s, and this guy left her. So these things happen. But anyways, gray divorce tripled between the 90s and the 2008 timeframe. Um, Now, nearly 40% of all divorcing people right now in the US are 50 and older. So that's a dramatic shift compared to the last few decades. Um, Also, people over 50 who've been married more than once are more than 2.5 times more likely to divorce than first time married couples. So, also, what I found interesting is people above 65, older than 65, the divorce rate is actually still increasing. So I'm presuming when you're above 65, you've got your social life and your financial life kind of figured out. So I really can't imagine that people are going to put up with a whole lot of nonsense if they're unhappy in a relationship. And when you're in your late 60s, over 65, you just don't have a whole lot of wiggle room for, hey, I'm going to put up with nonsense. So once you start seeing someone's true character, their true behavior, it's like, peace out, I'm done. And that's what happens. That's also what happens when people are in their late 40s and 50s. What are the factors? Well, one of which is empty nest syndrome. When the kids finally, say go off to college or move out, you've raised your kids and they move out, then you look at this person that you're married to and you're like, okay, do I want to spend my senior retirement years with this person, or who is this person? And all the focus that's been on the kids and your career and all that stuff has changed. And you look at this person, it's like, do I want to retire with this person? Do I want to spend the rest of my days with this person? And what happens is people in their late 40s and into their 50s, they say, I still have energy to change and flip the script and go in a whole different direction here. Um, and they still have, they consider that they still have time and energy to change gears, to change direction. And now there is financial pressure with people going through divorce over 50, because what's around the corner when you're going through divorce in your 50s? Well, you're going to take the hit from the legal fees. You're going to take, if you're a man, you're probably going to um, be hit hard from the divorce because men typically get hit a lot harder financially from divorces than women. That's fact. Um, and so you have retirement to consider with regard to divorcing. Now, interesting, there are some countries where there are stereotypes of men that have girlfriends. I'm thinking Italian specifically, other cultures, and some in the Middle East, where men have girlfriends. Hey, Pete, Palm Beach, I'm glad you're here. Pete, thanks for joining us. Um, but I think what happens is some cultures really there's so much stigma on divorce, like in the Italian culture. Let's go ahead and look up and see if there's, I don't know if any search is going to come up with if there's cultures that have a high prevalence of married men having girlfriends. All right, let's ask. Are there cultures, uh, are there cultures that stereotypically have okay stance with married men having girlfriends? Western Europe. Okay. France, Latin America have historically shown a higher prevalence toward extramarital relationships. France, Latin America. I'm truly thinking of Italy, Brazil, Colombia, Venezuela. There's a degree of social tolerance or machismo that permits men to have a trampa or amante, as it says on the side. And these are paramours, love relationships. So there are some cultures where divorce is no bueno. All right, the stigma of divorce or the cost, and that men have relationships. And I would bet that women do too. As a side note, talking about gray divorce, typically men don't always know that it's coming down the pike. Women kind of they get frustrated and they bide their time and they know what they're going to do for a long time, months to years. Where men, they may not just have the barometer to say, hey, something's changed in this relationship. So that's what happens is the men will be blindsided when the woman files for divorce, which is majority of the time here in the US, the woman files for divorce instead of the man. Going back to gray divorce, I did find one of the biggest things with Gen X men is there's basically less than half of Gen X men report being very satisfied in their marriages compared to 3 and 5 millennials and boomers. So millennials and boomers typically are much more satisfied in their marriages than Gen X men. The other thing that's very interesting is there's a fair amount of Gen X men that about 20% of Gen X men will initiate divorce because of sexless marriage. Okay, and these are marriages where there's just no sex as intimacy, and 20% of these relationships of these divorces are initiated in the Gen X phase by the men because it's a sexless marriage. All right, so enough of that. Now on to my next thing is I was going to talk a little bit about core story. So a core story is what you tell yourself on the inside. And it's not even what we tell ourselves, it's just how kind of how we relate to ourselves, what we think of ourselves. It's a story that typically runs way in the background, like a script of our self esteem, of our self image. And these things are developed in childhood. And what I find is that the core story is really something that drives and really informs our decisions in the day to day. And it's really tough to change your core story. As an example, you can be complimented. Say you're a server in a restaurant, you can be complimented just 5 times during a whole shift how amazing you are as a person, as a server. But the next day or 2 days later, your core story tells you that you're not good enough, that you're not appreciated, that you're not valued. So even though you get rave reviews and compliments, you still feel like you have to do more. A lot of Hollywood types are like that, that they're driven, just so driven by the inner demons that tell them they're not good enough and they have to perform and do better and do more. When they're beloved people, people love them, and they really beat themselves up subconsciously, and it's never enough in their minds. And so I'm going to work more in my video series about resetting the core story, the importance of a good, healthy core story, old tracks kind of thing, and how to reset it and how to change your core story, because it's so imperative. Say you want to start a business, say you want to change your career, the negative self-talk from an old core story is devastating sometimes, and it can really hamper you, and it's almost like having a chatterbox inside your head saying, no, you're not good enough, no, you can't do it, no, typically um, you're not going to be successful. And and what that is it's just the old reptilian brain trying to keep us safe. But unfortunately, um, it's not accurate. Unfortunately, it just takes and tries to keep us in a safety zone. You can be miserable as hell and still have that core story of chattering away, saying, you got to stay safe, you got to stay small, stay in the situation. And really, it's difficult to break from that core story and to get into a zone to where you realize you're successful, you're capable of success, you're capable of greater things, and capable of new challenges and standing up to new challenges. So I'm definitely going to work more on the core story. All right, on to better things. The lot of interest right now in the World Cup, and guess what? U.S. beat Paraguay. This is very exciting. I'm not big into soccer or football, as they call it all over the world, but I am going to take more interest in it because eventually I plan to move to Europe, and football is life over in Europe, pretty much. All there is to it. Football is life in Europe and a lot of places in the world. Here in the U.S., it's different. We call football, football, and then soccer is what the rest of the world calls football. But yeah, it looks like as far as football goes or soccer goes, the U.S. won 4-1 against Paraguay, and that's a tremendous score. That is a strong win. Now it's the initial rounds. So what does that tell us? You know, the U.S. is gonna come across some really more impressive teams. So I'm gonna take a lot more interest in soccer or football, as we call it across the world, and really pay more attention to the World Cup this time around. Unfortunately, I don't have a streaming service where I can watch the World Cup. So, is anybody out here watching the World Cup? Are you watching the games? Do you need streaming service like if you live in Indonesia or these other countries? I'm curious. Or do they show it on the public television? How do you watch the World Cup in other countries? All right. Appreciate all you guys that joined this morning on wee early hours of Saturday morning here on the East Coast. I hope you have a tremendous weekend. Realize there's people from all over the place. I have viewers from Morocco, France. I have viewers from Indonesia and Louisiana. All right. So appreciate you guys tuning in, and we'll see you again soon enough. Have a good week.